The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 cycles. 17 species sat on the Galactic Council, their representatives gathering in the crystal chambers of Nexus Prime to debate trade routes, settle territorial disputes, and maintain the delicate balance that kept billions of worlds turning in harmony. The humans had been members for barely 200 cycles, a blink in the cosmic timeline. Yet they had already proven themselves to be peculiar creatures. Ambassador Vexner of the Valorian Empire studied the human representative across the chamber with his 4 lateral eyes. Dr. Sarah Chun sat perfectly still in her delegation chair, her small bipedal frame dwarfed by the towering forms of the other council members. She wore the simple blue uniform of the Terran diplomatic corps, her dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. Her face remained carefully neutral, but Vexner had learned to read the tiny muscle movements around human eyes. She was worried. She had every reason to be. The chamber buzzed with angry chittering, subsonic rumbles, and electromagnetic pulses as the various species voiced their outrage. The humans had violated the Treaty of Corvash. They had established a research station in the Forbidden Zone, that dark cluster of dead systems beyond the outer rim where ancient warnings still pulsed from automated beacons. No species had ventured there in millennia, not since the precursors had vanished, leaving behind only their terrible weapons and dire prophecies. High Arbiter Zalkish, a crystalline being whose body reflected light in dizzying patterns, raised 3 of his appendages for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though anger still crackled in the air like static electricity. The evidence is undeniable, Zalkish intoned, his voice resonating through translation matrices across the chamber. Terran vessels were detected in Sector Null 9, construction materials, energy signatures. The humans have built a facility in direct violation of the most sacred law of this council. Sarah Chun stood slowly. She was barely taller than the chair she'd been sitting in, a fact that made several of the larger species rumble with what might have been amusement or contempt when she spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. We acknowledge our presence in that sector. We do not acknowledge any violation. The chamber erupted. Shouts, roars, and electromagnetic screams of protest filled the air. Vexner watched as Sarah remained standing, unmoved by the cacophony. There was something in her posture, something that reminded him of the way prey. Animals on his homeworld would freeze when they knew the predator was too close to outrun. The Treaty of Corvash explicitly forbids any incursion into the forbidden zones. This came from Ambassador Kriag, the Hive speaker, whose insectoid form clattered with agitation. Your species signed this treaty when you joined the council. You swore the same oath as all who came before you. Sarah waited for the translation to complete before responding. The Treaty of Corvash forbids military action and territorial claims in the forbidden zones. Our research station is neither. We claimed no territory. We brought no weapons. We seek only knowledge. Knowledge? Zalkish's crystalline body flared with red light, a sign of extreme displeasure. The forbidden zones contain horrors that ended the precursor civilization. Weapons that could crack planets like eggs. Technologies that drove entire species to madness. You humans, with your primitive understanding of the cosmos, dare to disturb what has slumbered for eons? Vexner leaned forward. He had served on the council for 60 cycles and had never seen the High Arbiter so agitated. Then again, he had never seen any species deliberately defy the council's most fundamental law. Sarah's hand moved to a small device on her belt. Security drones immediately activated, their weapons charging. She froze, then slowly raised both hands, showing they were empty. I request permission to present evidence, she said calmly. The Arbiter's colors shifted through yellow and orange before settling on a cautious green. Speak, but know that nothing you say or prevent the judgment that must come. A holographic display materialized above the chamber floor. It showed a star system, ancient and dead, its planets reduced to rubble orbiting a cooling dwarf star. But among the debris, something pulsed with a faint blue light. "This is System Null 9-4, Sarah began. 3 months ago, our long-range telescopes detected an anomaly. The signal pattern matched nothing in our databases or yours. It was clearly artificial, clearly a message. And rather than report this to the Council, you violated our laws." Kriag's mandibles clattered furiously. "We did report it," Sarah countered. "Request ID 4457 Alpha, submitted to the Council Science Division 14 weeks ago. We received no response." Vexner pulled up his own records. She was correct. The request had been filed and promptly buried in the bureaucratic machinery of the Council's administrative systems. Standard procedure for anything related to the Forbidden Zones was to ignore it and hope it went away. The hologram changed, showing a closer view of the anomaly. It was a structure massive and ancient, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. "We sent a small research team," Sarah continued. 12 scientists. No weapons. No territorial markers. They established a minimal footprint station on an asteroid in the outer belt and began analysis of the signal. "You fool," whispered Ambassador Ithlara of the Draconic Sovereignty, her serpentine form coiling with anxiety. "Do you have any concept of what you may have awakened?" Sarah's expression finally changed. A small smile touched her lips, though her eyes remained cold. "We awakened nothing, Ambassador. It was already awake, and it was calling for help." The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. "Impossible," Zalkish said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "The precursors are extinct, gone for 3 million cycles. Nothing remains but their ruins and their weapons." "The precursors are extinct," Sarah agreed. "But they weren't the first civilization in the galaxy. And they weren't the ones who left that beacon." She manipulated her control device. The hologram shifted again, showing data streams, mathematical formulas, and what appeared to be a star map, unlike anything Vexner had ever seen. The stars were positioned wrong, the constellations unfamiliar. "This is what the beacon showed us," Sarah said quietly. "A map of the galaxy as it existed 7 billion years ago. And a warning of what's coming." "What's coming?" Vexner found himself asking. Though dread was already pooling in his primary stomach dot, Sarah looked directly at him, and he saw something in her human eyes that chilled his blood. Not fear, not exactly. Something worse, knowledge. "The reason the precursors built their terrible weapons," she said. "The reason they fled to the Forbidden Zones and sealed them off. The reason they vanished despite all their power and technology." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber. "They were running from something. And that something is about to arrive in council space." The silence that followed was absolute. Zalkish's crystalline body had gone completely colorless. A state Vexner had only read about in ancient texts. "You lie. This is a human trick to justify your violation." "I wish I were lying," Sarah said softly. The beacon contained a countdown. "According to our calculations, we have approximately 400 cycles before the first wave reaches the outer colonies." "This is absurd." Kriag clicked. "Even if this fantasy were true, why would you not bring this information to the Council immediately?" Sarah's smile turned bitter. "We tried. Request ID 4457 Alpha, remember? When you ignored us, we made a choice. We could waste time trying to convince 17 species to take us seriously, or we could start preparing." "Preparing how?" Ithlara demanded. "By studying the only weapons ever created, that might stand a chance against what's coming. The precursor arsenal in the forbidden zones. The chamber erupted once more, but this time the anger was mixed with something else. Fear. Vexner watched Sarah Chun stand motionless amid the chaos, and suddenly understood. The humans hadn't violated the treaty out of arrogance or ignorance. They had violated it out of desperation. They had seen what was coming, and made a choice that they knew would bring the wrath of the entire galaxy down upon them. They had chosen to prepare rather than perish. This council calls for an immediate vote. Zalksh's voice cut through the noise. The Terran Federation has violated sacred law. The penalty is clear. Expulsion from the council and full embargo. All those in favor? 16 appendages, limbs, and energy fields rose in assent. Only Sarah remained still. Furthermore, the Arbiter continued, his colors now a deep, angry red. Humanity's flagrant disregard for cosmic law cannot stand. The Terran Federation will dismantle its illegal research station immediately and vacate the forbidden zones within 10 cycles, or face military enforcement. Sarah finally moved. She reached into her jacket pocket, slowly, and removed a small data chip. She placed it on the desk before her. "This contains everything we've learned," she said quietly. "The calculations, the projections, the timeline, what's coming for all of us." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each ambassador in turn. "When you're ready to stop being politicians and start being survivors, the data is here." She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. "You are hereby stripped of your ambassadorial status." Zalkish called F. 20 cycles had passed since Sarah Chun walked out of the crystal chambers. 20 cycles of escalating tension as humanity refused to abandon their research station in the Forbiddens. Zones. 20 cycles of the Council trying to maintain the illusion that everything was under control. Commander Veltros of the Council Enforcement Fleet stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Righteous Purpose, watching the tactical display with mounting frustration. 300 warships, the largest armada assembled in Council history, hung in formation at the edge of System Null 9. Before them, a single human station orbited a barren asteroid, its lights twinkling defiantly against the cosmic dark. "They must see us by now," his tactical officer reported. "Full sensor sweep of our fleet. They know what's coming." Valtros nodded slowly. He was a military creature, born and bred for command, but he took no pleasure in this mission. The humans had been strange allies, quick to laugh and quicker to help, always pushing boundaries, but never with malice. Now they stood accused of crimes against the cosmic order, and he was here to make them pay. "Open a channel," he ordered. The communication officer worked her console, and after a moment, a human face appeared on the screen. Not Sarah Chun, but a man in his middle years, wearing a white lab coat over casual clothes. His hair was graying, and deep lines creased his face. He looked tired. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, Station Director," the human said without preamble. "I'm guessing you're not here for a research collaboration." "Dr. Webb," Veltros began formally, "I am Commander Veltros of the Council Enforcement Fleet, by decree of the Galactic Council. You and your team are ordered to evacuate this station immediately. You have 6 standard hours to comply before we are authorized to use force." Webb's expression didn't change. "Commander, we can't do that. Cannot or will not." "Both, actually." Webb moved aside, and the camera angle shifted to show the interior of the research station. Veltros had expected a military installation, weapons emplacements, soldiers preparing for battle. Instead, he saw laboratories filled with equipment he didn't recognize. Scientists hunched over workstations, holographic displays showing data streams and calculations. One wall was covered with what appeared to be ancient symbols, glowing with a faint blue light. Do you see this? Webb gestured to the symbols. This is a language that predates the precursors by 4 billion years. 4 billion, Commander. We've been trying to decode it for 20 cycles, and we're barely scratching the surface. Your research interests do not excuse your violation of Council law, Veltros said, though something in his voice had softened. Webb laughed, but there was no humor in it. Council law. You want to talk about law when the entire galaxy is about to burn? He manipulated a control panel, and a holographic projection filled the space between them. It showed the Milky Way galaxy, beautiful and serene. Then points of red light began appearing at the edge, spreading inward like a disease. This is what's coming, Commander. We call it the harvest. Every 7 billion years, something sweeps through the galaxy, consuming every trace of advanced civilization. The species who built this beacon tried to warn the precursors. The precursors built their weapons and their fortresses in the forbidden zones, and still they failed. They all failed. Valtros felt his combat instincts warring with something deeper, more primal, fear. This is speculation. Ancient ghosts and phantom threats. Is it? Webb's eyes were hard. Then explain why 3 Council research vessels disappeared in Sector Null 17 last month. Explain why the colony on Tressioner 7 went silent 2 weeks ago. Explain why your long-range sensors keep picking up gravitational anomalies at the galactic rim that match nothing in any database. The bridge crew had gone quiet. Valtros checked his own tactical data. The incidents Webb mentioned were classified, known only to High Command. How did the humans know? We have spies in your fleets, your governments, your research institutions, Webb said, reading Veltros' expression. Not because we want to be your enemy, but because we need to know what you know, and what you're not telling your own people. You admit to espionage against the Council? Veltros felt his duty reasserting itself. That alone justifies our actions here. Do what you have to do, Commander, Webb said wearily. Destroy this station. Kill my team. It won't change what's coming. We've already transmitted our findings to every human colony in explored space. The data is out there. The warning is given. Valtros was about to respond when alarms began shrieking across his bridge. The tactical officer's face went pale, his multiple arms working frantically over his console. Commander. Energy spike. Unknown signature appearing at system coordinates 379 Mark 44. The main display shifted to show empty space. Then it wasn't empty. Something was tearing through reality itself, a wound in space that pulsed with sickly green light. The thing that emerged defied description. It was organic and mechanical simultaneously, massive beyond comprehension. Its surface crawling with structures that might have been weapons or sensory organs or something else entirely. What in the name of the Founders? Veltros breathed. That, Webb said quietly from the communication screen, is a scout. A probe sent ahead to test for resistance. The main fleet is still 40 cycles out, but the vanguard is early. The creature, if it could be called such, began moving toward the Council fleet. It accelerated impossibly fast, covering millions of kilometers in seconds. Valtros barely had time to order evasive maneuvers before the thing was among them. The dreadnought Eternal Vigilance was the first to die. The creature simply passed through it, and the mighty warship came apart like paper in a hurricane. Explosions bloomed across the tactical display as more ships tried to engage, their weapons having no visible effect on the intruder. All ships scatter formation. Valtros ordered. Concentrate fire on central mass. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic rounds converged on the creature. For a moment, Valtros dared to hope. Then the thing absorbed every attack, its surface rippling like water, and responded with weapons of its own, Lances of green fire shot out in every direction. Where they struck council ships, matter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, erased. Ships and crews vanished from existence, leaving only empty space and fading energy signatures. Valtros watched helplessly as his fleet, the pride of council military might, was dismantled in minutes. 300 warships reduced to burning debris and silent screams across communication channels. "Commander," his weapons officer said, voice shaking, "recommend immediate retreat. We can't fight this thing." "Retreat? Where?" Valtros asked hollowly. "That thing will follow us back to council space. It will destroy everything in its path." A new voice cut into the communication channel. Female, calm, terrifyingly familiar. "Council fleet, this is Director Chun. Cut your engines and drift. Make no aggressive moves." Sarah Chun's face appeared on his screen. She was no longer in her diplomatic uniform, but wore combat armor marked with human military insignia. Behind her, Valtros could see what looked like a combat bridge, humans working frantically at weapon stations. "Chun?" Valtros couldn't hide his confusion. "Where are you? What are you doing?" "What we've been preparing for," Sarah said. "Now watch and understand why we violated your laws." The human research station suddenly came alive. The asteroid it orbited split open like a flower, revealing what had been hidden beneath. Weapons, massive, ancient, clearly salvaged from precursor technology. But these weren't museum pieces. They hummed with power, their energy signatures making Valtros essencers scream warnings. "Fire," Sarah said simply. The precursor weapon spoke. Beams of coherent light that existed in colors the eye couldn't process. Projectiles that seemed to move through dimensions Valtros couldn't comprehend. Energy patterns that made reality itself buckle and fold. The creature noticed. For the first time since its arrival, it responded to an attack. It turned, its massive bulk orienting toward the human station, and Valtros realized with horror that it was focusing all its attention on this new threat. "Pull back," he ordered his surviving ships. "Give the humans room to work." The battle that followed defied everything Valtros knew about warfare. The creature and the human station exchanged fire across the void, weapons that shouldn't exist trading blows that physics couldn't explain. The human installation took hits, whole sections vaporizing under the creature's assault. But the ancient weapons kept firing, kept fighting. Sarah Chun's voice remained calm throughout, calling out targets, coordinating fire. "Marcus, redirect power from life support, sections 7 through 12. Engineering, I need the main cannon charged in 30 seconds, or we're done. Sarah, the reactor can't take this strain." Webb's voice, now strained and urgent. "It doesn't have to survive. It just has to last long enough." The main cannon fired. Valtros' sensors couldn't track what it released. Only that reality itself seemed to flex and scream. The creature absorbed the hit, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then it began to collapse. Not physically dying, but folding in on itself, dimensional integrity failing, whatever held it together unraveling. It writhed, if something that alien could be said to writhe, and then it simply winked out of existence. The silence that followed was deafening. Valtros stared at his tea. The crystal chambers had never been designed for what they had become. A war room. Holographic displays replaced the traditional artwork, showing fleet positions, defensive installations, and the ever-advancing red markers that represented the Harvest Vanguard. 80 cycles had passed since Commander Valtros returned with his shattered fleet in impossible testimony. 80 cycles of denial, argument, and finally, reluctant acceptance. Ambassador Thexner studied the tactical map with his 4 eyes, each focusing on a different aspect of the nightmare unfolding before them. 17 Council species had committed their fleets to the defense network. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The Outer Rim colonies are evacuating, reported Admiral Kreshtar, the newly appointed Supreme Commander of Council Defense Forces. Her form, massive and armored, dominated one side of the chamber. But we're losing civilian transports faster than we can protect them. The Harvest probes are targeting evacuation routes specifically. How many have we lost? High Arbiter Zalkish asked, his crystalline body dim with grief. Last count was 473 ships. Roughly 2 million souls. Kreshtar's voice remained steady, but Dexner could see the strain in her posture. The probes are learning our tactics, adapting. Every engagement teaches them how we fight. A door at the far end of the chamber opened, and silence fell. Sarah Chun entered, flanked by 2 human soldiers in power armor. She no longer wore diplomatic robes or military fatigues. Instead, she was dressed in something entirely new. Armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Precursor technology, Vexner realized. She was wearing weapons from the Forbidden Zones. Behind her walked Dr. Marcus Webb and a dozen other humans, each wearing similar adaptive armor, each carrying the weight of knowledge that had cost them everything to obtain. Ambassador Chun, Zalkish began, then corrected himself. Director Chun, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the chamber without need for amplification. You didn't summon us here to exchange courtesies. The Harvest Vanguard will reach the core worlds in 40 cycles. You need solutions, and you need them now. She gestured, and a holographic human appeared beside her, translucent and shimmering. The AI assistant she'd brought manipulated the central display, showing new data that made several council members gasp. This is what we've learned in the 80 cycles since you declared war on us, Sarah continued. The Harvest isn't a single species or empire. It's a collective. Millions of species, all absorbed, all transformed into components of a galactic-scale organism. Every civilization it encounters either joins it or dies. We know this already, Kriag chittered impatiently. Tell us something useful. Sarah's smile was cold. The useful part is that we've found a weakness. The Harvest operates on a hive consciousness, coordinated through quantum-entangled communication nodes. Destroy the nodes, and you fracture the collective. Create enough chaos, and the individual components start making mistakes. And how do we destroy these nodes? Admiral Kreshtar leaned forward. Our weapons barely scratch their scouts. Their capital vessels shrug off concentrated fleet bombardment. With these, Sarah said. The humans behind her stepped forward, each holding devices that looked like crystalline spheres wrapped in circuitry. They pulsed with soft blue light, and Vexner felt his scales prickling just being near them. Resonance bombs, Webb explained, his scientific enthusiasm breaking through despite the dire circumstances. We based them on precursor technology, but the theory is human. Everything has a resonant frequency. Find the right frequency, and you can make anything vibrate itself to pieces. These bombs target the quantum entanglement field that holds the Harvest together. How effective are they? Kreshtar demanded. We've tested them on captured Harvest probes, Sarah replied. 100% success rate. But here's the problem. We can only manufacture them in facilities built within the Forbidden Zones, using materials we can only harvest there. And we only have 23 bombs completed. 23? Ithlara serpentine form coiled in distress. For an enemy fleet numbering in the tens of thousands? Which is why we're not here to offer you weapons, Sarah said. We're here to offer you a plan. She manipulated the display again, and the galactic map shifted. A line appeared, cutting through council space like a wound, connecting dozens of systems. This is the Maginot Cluster. 47 star systems, all positioned along the Harvest's projected invasion route. Most are uninhabited or only lightly populated. We evacuate what few people remain, then we fortify them. Fortify with what? Zalkish asked. We barely have enough ships to protect the core worlds. Not ships, Sarah corrected. Precursor installations. We've mapped 78 abandoned weapons platforms in the Forbidden Zones. Ancient, yes, but still functional. We move them to the Maginot Cluster, position them in overlapping fields of fire, and wire them all to our resonance bombs. Understanding dawned on Dexner's face. You want to create a killing field. Channel the Harvest through those systems, and activate the bombs when they're concentrated. Exactly, Webb confirmed. The resonance cascade will propagate through their quantum network. Every ship in range will be affected. If our calculations are correct, we could eliminate 30 to 40% of their invasion force. And if your calculations are wrong? Kriog demanded. Sarah met the insectoid ambassador's compound eyes without flinching. Then we all die a little faster than we would have anyway. But at least we die fighting. The chamber erupted in debate. Some voices called for acceptance, others for alternative strategies. Dexner watched Sarah through it all, seeing the exhaustion in her stance, the toll that 80 cycles of desperate research had taken. The humans had sacrificed everything for this moment. Their council membership, their trade agreements, their diplomatic relationships. They had willingly become pariahs to save species that had condemned them. How long would this take to implement? Admiral Kreshtar's voice cut through the chaos. With full council cooperation? 25 cycles to move the weapons platforms, another 10 to position and calibrate them, Sarah answered. It'll be close. Very close. And what do you need from us? Everything, Sarah said simply. Your ships to help transport the platforms. Your engineers to help install them. Your soldiers to hold the line while we work. Your trust that we're not doing this for power or glory, but because it's the only way we survive. Silence fell again. Dexner looked around the chamber, seeing the same realization on every face. The humans were offering them salvation, but it came with a price, admitting they had been wrong, admitting that human defiance of council law had been the only thing standing between civilization and extinction. High Arbiter Zalkish's crystalline form slowly brightened, shifting through colors until it settled on a determined blue. I call for a vote. All in favor of Operation Maginot, as proposed by Director Chun and the Terran Research Division? One by one, appendages rose. Slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Even Kriog, who had been humanity's harshest critic, raised 3 of her limbs in assent. Unanimous, Zalkish declared. Director Chun, the council places itself under your guidance. Tell us what you need. Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly, relief visible for just a moment before she straightened again. First, we need to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the war you declared on humanity 80 cycles ago. Consider it rescinded, Zalkish said immediately. Humanity is restored to full council membership, with our deepest apologies for our blindness. We don't want apologies, Sarah said sharply. We want understanding. We violated your laws, because your laws would have killed us all. We armed ourselves with Forbidden's weapons, because those weapons were the only things that could protect us. We've been called warmongers, zealots, dangerous fools. But everything we did to survive. She walked to the center of the chamber, her boots echoing on the crystal floor. The precursors failed because they tried to face the harvest alone, each species hoarding its knowledge, each civilization building its own bunker. We can't make that mistake. When this is over, if we survive, the Forbidden Zones need to be opened. Not for conquest or profit, but for knowledge. Every species needs access to precursor technology, to their records, to their warnings. You ask us to overturn 3,000 cycles of tradition, Ithlara said, though her tone was thoughtful rather than hostile. I'm asking you to evolve or die, Sarah replied. The galaxy is bigger and more dangerous than you ever imagined. The harvest is just the latest threat. There will be others. Unless we learn from the past, unless we prepare for the future, we're nothing but another footnote in cosmic history. Dexner stood, his decision made. The Valorian Empire will support this. All of it. The Maginot operation and the opening of the Forbidden Zones. Other voices joined his. Not all, and not immediately, but enough. The tide was turning. Then we begin now, Sarah said. Admiral Kreshdar, I'll need your best engineers on transport vessels within 12 hours. Dr. Webb will coordinate with your science teams on platform installation. Ambassador Dexner, your people have the best deep space construction experience. We? 38 cycles. That was all they had managed before the Harvest Vanguard reached the Maginot Cluster. 3 cycles short of Sarah Chun's calculations. 3 cycles that could have meant the difference between victory and annihilation. But there was no time left for regrets, only for fighting. Commander Veltros stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope, a ship that had been retrofitted with both Council and precursor technology. A mongrel vessel that represented everything the galaxy had become in such a short time. Around him, his crew worked with grim efficiency. Humans alongside Valorians, Draconics working beside Hive members. Species that had barely tolerated each other now functioned as a single unit. Enemy fleet entering sensor range, his tactical officer reported. Mother of the Founders, there are so many of them. The display showed what looked like a swarm of locusts made of metal and flesh, stretching across light years. Harvest ships of every conceivable size and configuration, some clearly recognizable as vessels from extinct civilizations, others so alien that scanners couldn't classify them. Thousands upon thousands, all moving with the coordinated precision of a single organism. All defensive stations report ready, came Sarah Chun's voice across the command channel. She was positioned at the heart of the Maginot Cluster, in a command station built from a precursor facility that had once housed weapons capable of cracking moons. Now it housed her, Dr. Webb, and the resonance bombs that represented their last desperate hope. Director Chun were detecting anomalous readings from their forward elements, Veltros reported. They're not advancing in standard formation. It's almost like they're probing, testing our defenses. Because they are, Sarah replied. The harvest learns. It's absorbed millions of species over billions of years. It knows every trick, every tactic. Our only advantage is that we're using weapons it hasn't seen before. Admiral Kreshdar's voice joined the channel from her flagship at the cluster's northern anchor point. All ships, remember your assignments. We hold the line. We keep them concentrated. We do not break formation, no matter what they throw at us. The first wave hit 3 minutes later. Harvest scouts, the same type that had devastated Veltros' fleet in System 09, came screaming out of hyperspace by the hundreds. But this time, the Council forces were ready. Precursor weapons platforms activated, their ancient technology awakening with purpose. Beams of impossible light lanced across the void, and the scouts began dying. But for every one that fell, 2 more took its place. The harvest didn't care about losses. Individual units were meaningless to a collective that spanned galaxies. Heavy cruisers approaching Defense Grid Alpha, Veltros called out. Count is 300 and climbing. Activate Defensive Array 7 through 14, Sarah ordered. Route power from Sectors 9 and 12. Let them come in close. Veltros watched as the human strategy unfolded. Rather than trying to hold the harvest at maximum range, Sarah was deliberately creating corridors, channels that funneled the enemy fleet into overlapping fields of fire. The Harvest poured through these openings, thinking they had found weaknesses, only to encounter concentrated firepower that tore through their formations. "It's working," his tactical officer said with something like wonder in his voice. "They're taking the bait. They won't fall for it long," Sarah cautioned. "The collective will learn. We have maybe an hour before they adapt." She was optimistic. It took 37 minutes. The Harvest fleet suddenly shifted tactics. Instead of following the channels, they began attacking the weapons platforms directly, focusing fire on the nodes Sarah had designated as critical. Precursor installations that had survived millions of years began dying under concentrated assault. "We're losing platforms faster than we can compensate." Webb's voice came through, strained with stress. "If they take out the primary nodes, the resonance cascade won't propagate. Then we adapt faster than they do," Sarah said. "All ships, new orders. Form up on the remaining platforms. Use your vessels as shields. Protect those installations with everything you have." Valtros didn't hesitate. "You heard her. All power to forward shields. Position us between Platform 7 and incoming fire. Engineering, I need every erg we can spare." Around him, thousands of ships moved into position, captains and crews from 17 species making the same choice. They would hold the line not because they were ordered to, but because they understood what failure meant. The battle became a grinding nightmare of attrition. Ships died by the dozens, their crews vaporizing in explosions that briefly lit up the cosmic dark. But for every Council vessel destroyed, the Harvest lost 10. The old weapons of the precursors, guided by the tactical genius of a dozen species working in concert, were taking a toll that the collective couldn't ignore. 70% of the Harvest vanguard is now within the kill zone, Sarah reported. But we've lost 40% of our platforms. If they break through before we can activate the bombs. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Vexner's voice came across the channel from his position on the eastern flank. "Director Chun, we're being overwhelmed here. The Harvest is concentrating forces on Section 12. We can't hold much longer." Valtros checked his tactical display and felt his blood run cold. The eastern flank was collapsing. If it fell, the Harvest would flank the remaining defenses, and the entire operation would fail. "I'm going," Sarah said simply. "What?" Webb's voice was sharp with alarm. "Sarah, you can't leave the command center. You're coordinating the entire defense. The AI can handle coordination, but I'm the only one here wearing functional precursor armor, and Dexnar needs help now." "Director Chun, that's suicide," Admiral Kreshtar said, her normally steady voice showing cracks. "You can't face a Harvest battle group with just armor, no matter how advanced. Watch me." Veltros saw it happen on his sensors. A small craft, barely larger than a fighter, launched from the command station and accelerated toward the collapsing eastern flank. It moved with impossible agility, weaving through Harvest fire with precision that suggested either incredible skill or AI-assisted piloting. Probably both. Sarah Chun's fighter entered the combat zone like a meteor. The precursor armor she wore extended beyond her physical form, creating energy shields and weapon systems that made her craft punch far above its weight class. She tore into the Harvest forces with focused fury, targeting command vessels, disrupting formations, creating chaos. "She's insane," Veltros breathed. "She's human," his tactical officer replied, and there was something like reverence in his voice. The eastern flank stabilized, not because Sarah could defeat an entire battle group alone, but because her presence gave the defenders hope. Ships that had been preparing to retreat instead rallied, pouring fire into the Harvest forces with renewed determination. 85% of enemy forces in the kill zone, the AI coordinator announced. 90%, 95. Close enough, Sarah said, her voice slightly breathless from combat. Dr. Webb, activate the resonance bombs on my mark. Sarah, you're still in the blast zone. Webb protested. I know. Do it anyway. 3, 2, 1, mark. The universe screamed. Veltros would later struggle to describe what he witnessed. The resonance bombs didn't explode in the traditional sense. Instead, they emitted a pulse that existed in dimensions his sensors couldn't measure, a vibration that propagated through the quantum entanglement field holding the Harvest Collective together. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Harvest ships began tearing themselves apart from the inside out as their shared consciousness fragmented. The perfect coordination that made them so deadly dissolved into chaos as millions of individual components suddenly found themselves alone, cut off from the collective mind that had guided them for eons. Some tried to fight on. Others attempted to flee. Many simply stopped, their alien minds unable to process existence outside the collective. And through it all, Council forces poured fire into the confused mass, destroying ships that had no idea how to defend themselves individually. 90% enemy casualties, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. 95, 98, they're breaking off. The Harvest is retreating. Cheers erupted across the command channel, voices from a dozen species joining in a moment of pure relief and triumph. They had done it. They had stopped the impossible. But Veltros was scanning for one specific signal. Director Chun, report. Sarah, are you there? Silence. Sarah. Webb's voice raw with fear. Someone find her. Her transponder went dark. Ships scattered across the battlefield began searching, sensors sweeping through debris fields and radiation clouds. Minutes passed like hours. Then a draconic scout ship transmitted coordinates. Found her. She's alive, but her ship is badly damaged. Life support is failing. Veltros personally led the rescue operation, his ship reaching Sarah's crippled fighter in minutes that felt like eternities. When they brought her aboard, her precursor armor was scorched and cracked, energy conduits sparking and failing. But she was conscious, and when the medical team removed her helmet, she was smiling. Did we win? She asked. We won, Veltros confirmed, his voice thick with emotions he didn't fully understand. The Harvest Vanguard is destroyed. The main fleet will take cycles to adapt and reform.